Hi, I'm Dr. Mila Brujic, and today we're going to be talking with Dr. Nick Sostillo about breaking practice ownership myths about the next generation of optometrists on today's OI show. Dr. Nick Sostillo, I knew you as a student, I knew you as a leader of the private practice club at SUNY, I knew you as a leader in solution. Welcome. For those in the audience that maybe don't know about you, Nick, your background, share with us a little bit about your background. First, with your just kind of generalized interest in private practice when you were in school with the private practice club, your solution leadership role, and then when you graduated optometry school.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, Mila, I really wanted to thank you for having me on. I really do appreciate it. Being a student, 7 years ago, we were just talking about was the first time that I met you in Optometric Insights, and overall, it's a great honor to be on the show with you. So I really, really do appreciate you having me on. But yeah, so overall, I started back in 2015, straight out of UConn, University of Connecticut, at SUNY College of Optometry. And really, I sparked an interest, I would say, in private practice optometry and became inspired. Actually, before that, I do have a family friend who has had a lot of success in the private practice optometry world. I saw how well he was doing, how much he really loved his life, and I was like, well, I can get into something like that.
So Nick, this was in optometry school that you kind of were really starting to see this path for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, where it started in terms of my journey as a student and getting into the private practice world was through the private practice organization on campus. At SUNY, we have the Student Optometric Leadership Association for Private Practice. And essentially there, I was actually working hand in hand for about 3 years. I started off as a student liaison and then worked my way up as vice president and then eventually as president of the private practice club, and really immersed myself in the private practice world, whether it was attending different conferences and networking with other successful practice owners, and also really through the different talks and everything that we either hosted at our school, or we would host at, or see actually at the conferences. And really the biggest one was the Student Optometric Leadership Network, which we've seen each other at several times, and really that was a instrumental in leadership training for me as a private practice owner.
So Nick, that's the acronym for that conference is the Solution Conference. Share with the listeners a little bit more about that, because I'll tell you, Nick, so I went to optometry school. I graduated 20 years ago. There was no such thing as private practice clubs. That just didn't exist when I was in optometry school. So when I saw this and when I saw the interest that you guys had in practice ownership and the conference that you guys had put together as students, I mean, it's just unbelievable to see. So share with the audience again a little bit more about what that Solution Conference is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like in the name, Student Optometric Leadership Network, really it was training for leaders of optometry and really progressing private practice, in the best way possible. And really what Solution did, it was really a small conference that we would have once a year, but it would really carry with us for the rest of the year. And whenever we would bring it back actually to the to school, a lot of people were like, "Oh, can I get in on this?" And we're like, "Oh, well, we can't really do that, but we could certainly give you a little bit and give you a taste from these speakers that come to the conference." But essentially, what it did was propel us and better prepare us for the next phase of our life in practice ownership. And without Solution, I really, really would not. I don't think that I'd be here where I am right now. But overall, it really is just an amazing organization that makes basically makes and propels the leaders of optometry in the future.
Nick, as a practitioner, as a clinician, as a practice owner, what I saw like just absolutely inspired me with people like you that are really interested in wanting to know as much as possible about not necessarily the clinical side of things, but how that all translates into the actual optometric business model. So it's cool.
Exactly.
So now let's fast forward to the most prominent, most important day of your life. It was May of 2019 when you finally graduate. You get the
Yep.
Doctor of Optometry from SUNY. Take us from the path from where you were in 2019 to today.
Absolutely. So, in 2019, after graduation, I did, before that, I actually was in talks to basically get into a private practice that had a situation where I would be able to either buy into or buy out the practice. And fortunately, actually, I met through the Connecticut State Optometric meeting that prior year. I met the person who would give me my first job, and also would allot me this opportunity to buy out a practice. But anyways, essentially from 2019, I started as part-time, about 2.5 days per week with this doctor. And really the reasoning behind that is that I wanted to make sure to get as much a wealth of an experience as best as I possibly could, in order to best prepare me for practice ownership. And what I mean by that is just to see the different modalities of practice, and see exactly what was out there, what some doctors were doing that were doing a great job with certain things, but maybe not so good of a job with some other things. And I worked with this doctor, and then I also worked with another doctor at another private practice location. And then ultimately, 2022 came around, and this doctor that I've been working with since graduation, said, "Hey, well, I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to move on to the next step of my life." And that led up to me having the opportunity to buy an established optometry practice that was overall doing well. It fit well with me, and I had a great, obviously connection with the doctor and the patient base. And the stars just aligned and allowed me to have this opportunity. Yep.
Nick, does the senior doctor still see patients in the practice?
Yep.
Because the purchase was actually done in, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was April of 2022,
Yep.
correct?
April 29th, 2022 is the closing
Okay,
date. Yep.
great. So
Absolutely.
is the senior doc still on in the practice?
Yep. So, so he's still in the practice. So he wanted to make sure, because as a retiring doctor, you want to make sure that you're getting the transition period that you want.
Yeah.
And for him, he wanted to stay on for roughly about 5 years at a part-time basis. Currently, he's working 24 hours a week, and he's going to be doing this for about 3 years, and then he's going to cut his schedule down for the last two to about 16 hours per week. And
That's great.
that's what he was comfortable with. Yep.
So Nick, prior to you purchasing the practice, was he in the practice more days a week? Was he in the practice?
Yeah,
How was his
absolutely.
schedule?
Absolutely. So he did, when I started with him, he did end up slowing down just a little bit. He was roughly there for about, like 32 hours, I want to say, roughly,
Okay.
prior. So he really cut back about 8 hours, of patient care a week.
Yeah.
But yeah, but roughly, I would say 32 hours he was working prior to the takeover. Yep.
So you ramped up your schedule a little bit. He brought his down a little bit. That's
We
great.
basically did the switch. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then Nick, I think that's a nice progression. I think optometry, barring we're mentally sound, we're physically capable of doing the
Yep.
job. I think that's the beautiful part about our profession, is we can continue to do that. And I really love that strategy of that nice kind of slow phase out, as opposed to today the keys switch and everything's changed in the practice. That's such a smart strategy, Nick, on yours and your senior doctor's part. I really like that. How much of a, well, I have several questions, Nick. So first
Yep.
and foremost, did you graduate with debt? Like, did you have student loans when you graduated optometry school?
I sure did. Yeah. Just about as much as any other graduating OD would.
So here's the part that I need to wrap my mind around, Nick,
Yep.
because this is the challenge that I think, like even back 20 years ago, this was the challenge for me. Like I had student debt as well too, but now I'm going and buying into this practice, and my timeline was almost identical to yours, Nick. It was like 3 years after graduation, and then we're taking the next phase with partnership and everything like that. So there's a lot of concern around debt and the fact that it's going to limit some potential opportunities. So how did you manage that debt and then give yourself an opportunity to say, you know what, this is the practice where I want to go into, and I know that ownership is what I want. How did you manage? Not even how did you, how are you managing all of
Yeah.
that? Because now I think you have a second note to somebody, correct?
Yeah,
With for the
absolutely.
practice?
Yeah, so overall, I do have a note for the practice, absolutely. But to answer your question about the initial debt as from optometry school, typically, I mean, it's just sound budgeting, right? I mean, you can't go out and spend your paycheck on this and that, all these frivolous things. Really, what was instilled in me as a student is that you really need to, yes, you're making the doctor money now, but now we have to start making the doctor's salary, but living still like a student. Yeah, okay, maybe you get to spend your money a little bit here, have some dinners, live in a relatively nice place, but you can't go ahead and just start, blowing all of your paycheck. You have to budget. You have to budget. So yeah, so overall, I did maintain my budget. I tried to limit spending, frivolous spending, as much as I possibly could. And really, when it comes down to it, the banks, when they look at your debt, when you're buying a practice, they're not really too concerned too much about some other debt that you have. I mean, it's certainly not ideal for them, but the way that they look at you is that banks see the opportunity in healthcare, right? And they see that a private practice in general, it has a relatively high success rate, right? A 95% success rate. You look at some of the other, industries, like for example, buying a restaurant, right? What does a restaurant have for a success rate? 33%, right? So overall, the banks know that they'll be making their money, and really, that's, I think, in general, what the banks care about, and that's why I think that they'll loan out that sort of money for private practice.
Nick, you're young in age, but you're a very old soul. That's why I think I connected with you years ago at Solution. You're so right. So, Nick, you've really taken this kind of like sage sound advice of the, and it doesn't sound like it's fancy, right, Nick? It's strategic budgeting for a, hey, I graduated optometry school, but I know what it's like now to live like a student. So I can continue doing this right now for what I perceive as the long-term benefit of doing this in the short term. And
Exactly.
you made it and you managed it happen. Now, Nick, are you in your current office full time, or are you working anyplace else in addition to your own office?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this place certainly keeps me busy. So I am here on a full-time basis. Roughly, I go between 32 hours of patient care a week to 37, depending on whether or not I'm working the Saturday or if the other doctor is. But overall, yes, there certainly is enough for me to work here solely, and not have to pick up extra work elsewhere. Yeah.
And I'm assuming the other times or hours you're working on administrative stuff and all the other things that are involved in the
Absolutely,
practice.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. And Nick, when you graduated optometry school and you started with this practitioner, you said you were working in another office. Did you work in one location, or did you have multiple like places that you went to when you were working your other job? So you started
Yeah.
with this practice, but you had other positions that you were doing. How did that look on your schedule?
Yes. So where I started off, so when I started working with this other doctor, I was also in the process of negotiating because I really wanted to work for about two or three separate practices, different locations, separate doctors, separate organizations, really to get as much of a wealth of experience as I possibly could. Unfortunately, with the other, any other opportunity, didn't end up working out so well, and unfortunately, I actually ended up working as a traveling doctor, going to different nursing homes and providing
Oh,
patients, yep, with some care.
interesting.
And then COVID happened, the big shutdown. Unfortunately, any sort of third-party doctor, that wasn't directly affiliated with the nursing homes, that we weren't allowed to step foot in there
Hmm.
at the time. And then back when in the beginning, I decided to leave that, and I found another opportunity in a multiple location practice. I only worked in one location there, but overall it was another OD only private practice, and I got a lot of experience there as well.
That's great, Nick. Like even seeing the exposure to mobile technologies too, just from your nursing home experience, is
Absolutely.
probably going to pay dividends, even as you're looking to invest in new technologies in your current practice as well too.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
Nick, I have a tough question for you now.
Uh-oh.
So now imagine I'm either a first, a second, a third, or a fourth year optometry student. I am you 7 years ago, or 6 years ago, or 5 years ago, or when you were in optometry school,
Mhm.
and you know the student burden and the student load in terms of student debt that's starting to accumulate. What if you could give them one or two pieces of advice, if I'm that person and I'm interested in private practice, but I am concerned about my ability to do that because of my student loan debt. Give me a word or two of advice as a student and early on to help it so that I can be a private practice owner. So picture yourself talking to that student right now. What's the one or two piece of advice that you'd give them?
Absolutely. The number one thing that I would say, Mila, is you really need to put yourself out there in terms of your extracurriculars, right? Even if you're not totally interested in private practice, if you have a passion for something, something that you're going to be doing for, essentially the rest of your life, you really need to make sure that you're doing more on top of just your curricular duties, right, as a student. So overall, the number one thing that I'll say is when I was a student, and I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now if I didn't take this leap. I was for the private practice club. I was like, I probably won't get this position as the first year student liaison for the private practice club, and I probably won't get it. I had a lot of self doubt, Mila, and really the single best decision that I made was, you know what, Nick, shut up. Just go ahead, apply for this position. You never know what's going to happen. And I'm glad that I did. It was probably the single best decision that I made to go for this position, because I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I had today. You really need to put yourself out there with networking, put yourself out there in terms of extracurricular activities, because if you don't, then you're not going to be able to have a lot of these opportunities and the knowledge that you need to launch yourself into private practice ownership.
Well, this is a larger philosophical discussion, but
Yep.
you really are your own self-limiting prophecy, right?
Sure.
You said, "Well, I don't know if I'm going to do it," and then you finally said, "Nick, let's do it." You
Yep.
did it, and
Yep.
you were the person that defined what you actually ended up doing. Nick,
Absolutely.
you're one of those leaders that I always remembered too, and it's crazy, Nick. Like, you know, now that I talk to other practitioners that are out there, there's this concern that, well, we don't know if the next generation of optometrists is interested in practice ownership.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Nick, this conversation with you and my interaction with individuals from the private practice clubs across all the schools and colleges of optometry in the country, the Solution Conference just shows that there is this interest, and it's just really kind of connecting the dots from now, Nick, people like you who said, yeah, I wanted to do this and this is how I did it, and sharing those stories. And I think these are just so absolutely valuable for those students that are now looking at you, Nick, and saying, well, if Nick could do it, I could do it.
Well, that's it. Absolutely.
Yeah, but
I'm not particularly special, Mila. You really just have to put yourself out there, and things will work out for you, right? You have to make the right decisions in terms of your extracurriculars. It's really, really important. And in general, if something makes you feel, uncomfortable, like, I don't know if I could do this, right? Take the leap of faith. All right. The most rewarding thing that you could ever do is really take an uncomfortable situation and make it a comfortable situation.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do that just by kind of sliding by and just doing your schoolwork and doing the bare minimum. You really have to put yourself out there.
Well, Nick, I'll tell you, I could talk to you for about another 10 hours on this whole
Absolutely.
topic. This has been absolutely awesome. Nick, we're going to have you back on the show for sure. But I think today, I mean, you really broke a lot of these perceived myths about the next generation of optometrists and interest in practice ownership. And I just really, really think that your story in today's day and age is just awesome to hear for not only practitioners that are potentially interested in selling to younger practitioners that are going to be kind of the next generation of caregivers in those practices, but also to those students that, again, are intimidated by everything that's happening and just worried about getting through boards and saying that, yeah, it can happen. Like people can do this, and I'm seeing those models that can do this. So
Absolutely.
I thank you, Nick, for sharing your story. This was absolutely a pleasure to talk to you today.
Absolutely. Well, again, I really, really do appreciate you having me on, Milo. This was a great experience. I love what you're doing. I love, you and Dave, what you guys are doing for the profession is just nothing short of incredible. So again, I do appreciate the opportunity today.
Well, appreciate you, Nick, and thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Optometric Insights Show.